A hotel manager planted a $100,000 diamond necklace in the locker of a 70-year-old housekeeper who had worked there for 25 years. When the police arrived, they handcuffed the elderly woman in the middle of the grand lobby. She did not cry. She did not protest. She did not say a single word in her own defense. She simply lowered her head and accepted the humiliation in complete silence, while dozens of guests watched in horror. But there was one guest standing on the second-floor balcony, wearing a faded jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, who knew exactly what had happened. And when he walked down those marble stairs, the manager realized she had just destroyed her career in front of the person who owned every single brick of that building. The Grandview Hotel stood like a jewel on the California coastline, its Spanish colonial architecture blending seamlessly with the rugged beauty of the Pacific shore. 4 stories of whitewashed walls and terracotta tiles rose against the endless blue sky, surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens that burst with bougainvillea and jasmine. For 43 years, this boutique hotel had welcomed guests seeking refuge from the chaos of Los Angeles, offering them a sanctuary of quiet elegance and personalized service that no corporate chain could ever replicate. Keanu Reeves had purchased the Grandview 7 years ago, along with 3 other boutique properties scattered across California. It had been a quiet acquisition, handled entirely through his investment company with no fanfare or press releases. The hotels bore the names of their original owners, and Keanu preferred it that way. He had no interest in seeing his name emblazoned across buildings or mentioned in hospitality magazines. What interested him was preserving something precious, maintaining spaces where genuine human connection still mattered more than efficiency metrics and profit margins. But lately, something had been troubling him about the Grandview specifically. The customer reviews remained excellent on the surface, filled with praise for the ocean views and the gourmet restaurant and the spa services. Yet buried within those glowing reports were occasional mentions of something harder to define. A coldness in the atmosphere, a sense that the warmth which had once defined the Grandview experience was slowly evaporating like morning mist. More concerning were the employee turnover numbers his accountant had flagged during their quarterly review. Staff who had worked at the Grandview for decades were suddenly leaving. Some cited retirement. Others offered vague explanations about pursuing different opportunities. But the pattern was unmistakable. Something was driving away the very people who had made this hotel special. So Keanu had decided to see for himself. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, driving a modest sedan that looked nothing like the luxury vehicles typically parked in the Grandview's circular driveway. His disguise was simple but effective. Faded jeans worn soft from years of use. A plain gray hoodie beneath an old denim jacket. 3 days of stubble darkening his jaw. A worn baseball cap pulled low over his famous features. He carried a single duffel bag over his shoulder as he pushed through the ornate wooden doors into the lobby. The space opened before him like a cathedral of hospitality. High ceilings supported by exposed wooden beams. A massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. Comfortable seating areas arranged to encourage conversation while still preserving privacy. Through the tall windows, the Pacific Ocean sparkled in the afternoon sun. It was beautiful. It was exactly as he remembered. And yet, something felt different. The young woman behind the reception desk barely glanced up as he approached. Her name tag identified her as Brittany, and her attention was focused entirely on her phone, which she hastily slipped into her pocket when she finally noticed a guest standing before her. Checking in, she asked without enthusiasm. Reservation under Williams. Keanu replied using the alias his assistant had arranged. John Williams. A Brittany typed with obvious boredom, her eyes flicking occasionally toward the back office, where muffled conversation could be heard. 1 night or 2. 3 nights. Credit card and ID. Keanu handed over the documents, watching as Brittany processed them with mechanical efficiency. There was no warmth in her voice, no attempt to make him feel welcome, no inquiry about his journey or whether this was his first visit to the Grandview. She simply went through the motions like a robot programmed to complete transactions. Room 214. Second floor. Elevator is to your left. Checkout is at 11. She slid a key card across the counter without making eye contact. Have a nice stay. Keanu took the card and turned toward the elevator, but something made him pause. An elderly woman had emerged from a side corridor, pushing a housekeeping cart laden with fresh linens and cleaning supplies. She moved slowly but deliberately, her back slightly bent from decades of physical labor, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun beneath a crisp white cap. Despite her obvious age, there was something remarkably dignified about the way she carried herself. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed to perfection with not a single wrinkle visible. Her cart was organized with almost military precision, every item in its designated place. And as she passed the reception desk, she offered Brittany a warm smile that the young woman did not bother to return. But it was what happened next that caught Keanu's full attention. A family was struggling near the lobby seating area. A young mother with two small children, one of whom was crying inconsolably while the other tugged at her arm demanding attention. The mother looked exhausted, overwhelmed, close to tears herself. Luggage surrounded them in disarray, and the father was nowhere to be seen. The elderly housekeeper immediately changed course. Without a word, she approached the family and knelt down to the crying child's level, ignoring what must have been considerable pain in her aging knees. Keanu could not hear what she said, but within moments, the child's sobs had transformed into giggles. The housekeeper produced something from her pocket, a small wrapped candy perhaps, and presented it with a flourish that made both children laugh. The mother's face crumbled with relief and gratitude. She reached out and squeezed the elderly woman's hand, clearly thanking her profusely. The housekeeper simply smiled, patted the children's heads gently, and returned to her cart as if she had done nothing remarkable at all. Keanu watched this entire exchange with growing interest. Here was someone who understood what hospitality truly meant. Not the mechanical processing of transactions, but the genuine care for human beings in moments of struggle. He made a mental note of the housekeeper's face before heading toward the elevator. His room was comfortable and tastefully decorated, with a private balcony overlooking the ocean that justified every penny of the premium rate. Keanu dropped his duffel bag on the bed and stepped outside, letting the salt breeze wash over him as he contemplated his next moves. He needed to observe without being observed. He needed to understand what was happening inside this hotel that was driving away loyal employees and creating the subtle coldness that guests were beginning to notice. Most importantly, he needed to discover who was responsible. For the next several hours, Keanu wandered the hotel like a ghost. He sat in the lobby reading a newspaper, but his eyes were constantly moving, watching interactions between staff and guests. He nursed a coffee in the restaurant, observing how servers treated customers when they thought no one important was paying attention. He walked the gardens, noting which employees seemed happy and which seemed anxious. Everywhere he went, he saw the same pattern repeating itself. The older staff members, those who had clearly been working at the Grandview for years, moved with quiet confidence and genuine warmth. They greeted guests by name. They anticipated needs before they were expressed. They treated every interaction as an opportunity to create a moment of human connection. The newer employees were different. They completed their tasks efficiently enough, but there was a coldness to their demeanor, a sense that guests were interruptions rather than the entire purpose of their employment. They gathered in clusters to whisper among themselves, occasionally glancing toward older colleagues with expressions that seemed almost contemptuous. And at the center of this division stood one person, Victoria Ashford was the Grandview's general manager, a position she had held for approximately 2 years according to the information Keanu's assistant had gathered. She was in her early 30s, impeccably dressed in designer suits that probably cost more than some employees earned in a month. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her posture radiating authority and ambition. Keanu first observed her conducting a staff meeting in the conference room adjacent to the lobby. Through the glass walls, he watched her address a group of employees with the manner of a drill sergeant rather than a hospitality professional. Her gestures were sharp and demanding. Several older employees sat with their heads slightly bowed, while younger staff members nodded eagerly at whatever she was saying. Later, he saw her interact with a guest who had a complaint about room service. Victoria's smile was perfect, her words no doubt professionally appropriate, but there was something cold behind her eyes, something calculating. The moment the guest turned away satisfied, Victoria's expression shifted into one of obvious disdain. But it was what Keanu witnessed that evening that truly set off alarm bells in his mind. He had positioned himself in a quiet corner of the lobby bar, nursing a whiskey he had no intention of finishing, when Victoria approached two younger employees near the service corridor. The conversation was conducted in hushed tones, but Keanu's position allowed him to catch fragments of what was being said. "Cannot keep covering for her." Victoria's voice was sharp with frustration. "So slow it's embarrassing." One of the younger employees agreed. "Supposed to retire years ago." The other added with a snicker. Victoria glanced around the lobby, apparently checking for witnesses, but her eyes passed over Keanu without recognition. He was just another guest, unremarkable in his worn clothes and baseball cap. "The Diamond Initiative event is in 3 days." Victoria continued, her voice dropping even lower. "The Harrington party. If everything goes according to plan, we will finally have grounds to remove her, permanently." The younger employees exchanged knowing looks and nodded. Keanu felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He did not know exactly what they were planning, but the implications were clear. Someone was being targeted. Someone was about to be hurt, and he had a terrible suspicion he knew exactly who that someone was. The next morning, Keanu positioned himself in the lobby early, pretending to read a travel magazine while actually watching the housekeeping staff begin their daily routines. He spotted the elderly housekeeper from yesterday immediately. Her name, according to the discreet tag on her uniform, was Margaret, though he would later learn that everyone who truly knew her called her Maggie. Margaret O'Brien had worked at the Grandview Hotel for 25 years. She had started as a part-time housekeeper when the hotel was still owned by the Patterson family, working her way up to senior housekeeper through decades of dedication and impeccable service. She knew every corner of this building, every quirk of its aging plumbing, every secret spot where dust liked to accumulate. More importantly, she knew the guests. Regular visitors to the Grandview requested Maggie specifically. They sent her Christmas cards and birthday gifts. They asked about her life, her health, her family. For many of them, Maggie was not just a housekeeper, but a trusted friend who remembered their children's names and their preferred room temperatures and their favorite flowers to find waiting on their nightstands. Keanu learned all of this over the course of the day by simply paying attention. He watched Maggie move through her rounds with meticulous care, spending extra time in each room to ensure that everything was perfect. He observed her interactions with guests, noting how her weathered face transformed with genuine warmth whenever she encountered someone in the hallways. He saw her pause to help a confused elderly gentleman find the breakfast room, taking his arm gently and walking with him all the way there despite it being completely outside her duties. But he also saw something else. He saw the pain that Maggie tried so hard to hide. Her movements, though careful, betrayed the toll that years of physical labor had taken on her body. She winced when she bent to retrieve items from her cart. She rubbed her lower back when she thought no one was watching. Her hands, though steady when serving guests, trembled slightly during moments of rest, and there was a deeper pain visible in her eyes during quiet moments, a sadness that spoke of losses too profound to discuss openly. Keanu needed to understand her story. So during a quiet afternoon period, he approached George Patterson, the elderly bartender who had been at the Grandview almost as long as the building itself. George had the look of a man who knew everything that happened within these walls and could be trusted to share that knowledge with discretion. "That housekeeper Maggie," Keanu said casually, settling onto a bar stool. "She seems like she has been here forever." George smiled, his weathered face creasing with genuine affection. 25 years come December. Started the same month my daughter was born. Hell of a worker, hell of a person. She looks like she has had a hard life." George's smile faded into something more solemn. "Lost her husband Richard about 8 years back. Sweetest man you ever met. They were high school sweethearts, married 47 years. He was a veteran, served 2 tours in Vietnam, came back with demons he never quite conquered." Keanu nodded slowly. "PTSD. They did not call it that back then. They just called it being broken." George poured himself a small measure of whiskey and stared into the amber liquid. Richard struggled for decades. Nightmares, flashbacks, periods where he could not work at all. Maggie held that family together through sheer force of will. Worked double shifts here while taking care of him at home. Never complained. Not once. How did he pass? Heart attack. Came out of nowhere. George shook his head slowly. Some people said it was a mercy, given how much he suffered. But Maggie was devastated. They were supposed to retire together, see the grandchildren grow up, travel to all the places Richard talked about visiting after the war. Instead, she ended up alone. Does she have family nearby? A daughter in Seattle. Sweet girl, married well, has 2 kids of her own. She has been trying to get Maggie to move up there for years. George paused to serve a guest who had approached the bar, then returned to the conversation. "But Maggie refuses. Says she is not ready to be a burden on her daughter. Says the people here need her." Keanu absorbed this information in silence. Here was a woman who had spent her entire life caring for others, first her troubled husband, then her family. Now the guests of this hotel. A woman who found purpose in service, who defined her own worth by how much she could give to those around her. And someone was planning to destroy her. "I have noticed some tension," Keanu said carefully, "between the older staff and the new management." George's expression darkened immediately. That woman, he did not need to specify which woman, Victoria Ashford, came in 2 years ago with her fancy degree and her efficiency studies and her modernization plans. First thing she did was start pushing out the people who actually built this place. Pushing them out how? Pressure. Constant pressure. Impossible standards that keep changing. Write-ups for tiny infractions that nobody would have cared about before. Some folks took early retirement. Others got frustrated and left. The ones still here. George shook his head. They are just waiting for the axe to fall. And Maggie. Victoria has been trying to get rid of Maggie since day one. Calls her slow. Says she is too old to meet modern efficiency standards. Complains that she spends too much time talking to guests instead of turning over rooms quickly. George's voice dropped. But Maggie's got something Victoria cannot touch. The guests love her. The reviews mention her by name. Getting rid of Maggie without cause would create exactly the kind of publicity Victoria wants to avoid. So she needs to create cause. George met Keanu's eyes with sudden intensity. "You are asking a lot of questions for a regular guest." Keanu held his gaze without flinching. "I have learned to pay attention to people who deserve better than they are getting." Something shifted in George's expression. A flicker of hope, perhaps, or recognition of an ally. If you really want to understand what is happening here, watch the Diamond Initiative event on Thursday. Victoria's been planning something big, something that will change everything. Keanu thanked George for the conversation and the whiskey he had barely touched, then retreated to his room to think. The Diamond Initiative, as he learned through discreet inquiries, was an annual charity gala hosted by the hotel for its most prestigious clients. This year's event was being sponsored by the Harrington family, longtime patrons whose matriarch, Catherine Harrington, was celebrating her 80th birthday with a donation to children's hospitals across California. Catherine Harrington was also, according to hotel records, one of Maggie's most devoted admirers. She had been requesting Maggie specifically for her annual visits for over 15 years, and the two women had developed a genuine friendship that transcended the usual guest and staff relationship. The pieces were beginning to fall into place in Keanu's mind, and the picture they formed was deeply troubling. He spent the next day observing even more closely, positioning himself in locations where he could monitor both the daily operations and the whispered conversations that seemed increasingly frequent among Victoria and her inner circle. What he witnessed confirmed his worst suspicions. Victoria had assembled a small group of loyal employees, younger staff members who seemed more interested in advancing their careers than in serving guests. They gathered in storage rooms and empty conference spaces, always checking for witnesses before speaking openly. Keanu managed to position himself within earshot of several conversations by using his unremarkable appearance to blend into the background. The plan, as he gradually pieced together, was elegant in its cruelty. Catherine Harrington would be staying in the hotel's finest suite for the Diamond Initiative event. She was known to travel with significant jewelry, including several pieces that had been in her family for generations. Victoria intended to ensure that one of these pieces went missing during Maggie's final turn-down service of the suit. The jewelry would then be discovered in Maggie's employee locker. With multiple witnesses and irrefutable evidence, Victoria would have no choice but to terminate Maggie immediately and press charges. The scandal would be contained quickly, the elderly housekeeper would be destroyed, and Victoria would finally be free to complete her modernization of the Grandview's staff. The night before the Diamond Initiative event, Keanu made his own preparations. He contacted his security consultant, a former FBI agent named Mitchell who handled sensitive matters for several of Keanu's business interests. Within hours, hidden cameras had been installed in strategic locations throughout the hotel, including the employee locker room and the corridor leading to Catherine Harrington's suite. He also made one very important phone call. "Mrs. Harrington," he said when the elderly woman answered. "This is Keanu Reeves. I believe we have a mutual friend in danger, and I need your help." The Diamond Initiative Gala began at 7 in the evening, transforming the Grandview's ballroom into a glittering spectacle of wealth and philanthropy. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the marble floor. Waiters in pristine white jackets circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The orchestra played softly in one corner while guests mingled and admired the silent auction items arranged along the walls. Keanu attended the event in his usual disguise, hovering near the edges of the crowd where he could observe without being noticed. He watched Victoria work the room with practiced charm, greeting VIP guests with perfect smiles while constantly checking her phone for updates from her conspirators. Catherine Harrington arrived at 8, resplendent in a burgundy gown and wearing a diamond necklace that sparkled like captured starlight. She was escorted by her daughter and son-in-law, but her eyes swept the room until they found what she was looking for: Maggie. The elderly housekeeper was working the event, helping to ensure that everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. She wore her finest uniform, pressed to perfection, and moved through the service areas with quiet efficiency. When she spotted Catherine, her weathered face transformed with genuine joy. The two women embraced warmly, ignoring the curious looks from other guests who did not understand the friendship between a billionaire socialite and a hotel housekeeper. "My dear Maggie," Catherine said, holding the younger woman's hands. "You look absolutely wonderful, and you look like a queen, Mrs. Harrington. Happy birthday." They spoke for several minutes, catching up on family news and health updates and all the small details that matter between true friends. Keanu watched from across the room, noting that Victoria was also watching, her expression a carefully controlled mask that could not quite hide her impatience. The evening proceeded according to schedule. Speeches were made, donations were announced. The silent auction raised considerable sums for children's hospitals. And as the clock approached 10, Catherine announced that she was tired and would be retiring to her suite early. Maggie, as expected, was assigned to perform the turn-down service. Keanu positioned himself near the second-floor landing, where he could observe the corridor leading to Catherine's suite without being obviously present. He watched Maggie push her cart toward the room, moving slowly but steadily, completely unaware of the trap that had been set for her. She was inside the suite for approximately 20 minutes, performing her duties with the same meticulous care she brought to every task. When she emerged, she was smiling, no doubt having shared a few more words with her friend before saying good night. The moment Maggie disappeared into the service elevator, Victoria's voice crackled through her radio. "She is done. Check the suite." Now, two of Victoria's loyalists emerged from a nearby room where they had apparently been waiting. They entered Catherine's suite and emerged less than a minute later, speaking urgently into their radios. "It is gone. The diamond necklace from the dresser. It is not here." Even from his position down the corridor, Keanu could see Victoria's triumphant smile. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a carefully choreographed disaster. Victoria summoned hotel security and informed them that a piece of jewelry valued at over $100,000 was missing from a guest suite. The guest in question, she claimed, had already reported the loss in great distress. A search of the premises was immediately authorized. Within the hour, police officers arrived to assist with the investigation. Victoria directed them toward the employee locker room, suggesting that given the timing of the theft, certain staff members might warrant particular scrutiny. The diamond necklace was discovered in Maggie's locker at approximately 11:30 that night. She was brought to the lobby in handcuffs. Keanu watched from the second-floor balcony as two police officers escorted Maggie through the grand space that she had helped maintain for a quarter-century. She was still wearing her uniform, though it was now wrinkled from the search that had been conducted. Her silver hair had come loose from its neat bun. Her weathered face was pale with shock, but she did not cry. She did not protest. She did not proclaim her innocence or accuse her enemies or cause any kind of scene. She simply walked with quiet dignity, her head slightly bowed, accepting the humiliation as if she had somehow expected it all along. Victoria followed close behind, her expression arranged into a mask of professional concern that could not quite disguise the satisfaction in her eyes. Several of her loyal employees had gathered to witness the spectacle, exchanging glances that spoke of shared triumph. "This is such a terrible situation," Victoria announced loudly enough for the gathered guests and staff to hear. "Maggie O'Brien has worked here for many years, but we cannot tolerate theft under any circumstances. The evidence is clear, and we will fully cooperate with the police investigation." Some guests watched in shock. Others turned away, uncomfortable with the public display. A few longtime visitors who recognized Maggie looked on with expressions of disbelief and sorrow. And then a voice cut through the lobby with quiet authority. "That will not be necessary." Every head turned toward the marble staircase. Keanu Reeves descended slowly, his worn baseball cap now removed, his famous features fully visible in the chandelier light. He still wore the faded jeans and simple jacket that had served as his disguise. But there was nothing disguised about his presence now. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned not just this room, but every wall and floor and piece of furniture within it. Victoria's face went through a remarkable transformation. Confusion gave way to recognition, which gave way to shock, which gave way to something very close to terror. "Mr. Reeves." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I had no idea you were staying with us. If I had known you were coming for an inspection, I would have." "You would have what?" Keanu interrupted, his voice gentle, but somehow devastating. "Hidden your scheme more carefully? Chosen a different victim? Or perhaps postponed your plan to frame an innocent woman until I had departed?" The color drained from Victoria's face entirely. "I do not know what you mean, sir. We discovered stolen property in an employee's locker. The evidence is manufactured." The single word landed like a thunderclap. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small tablet computer. "I have owned this hotel for 7 years, Victoria. Did you really think I would not notice when something was wrong? Did you really believe I would allow you to destroy a loyal employee without investigating what was happening here?" He tapped the tablet screen, and the images that appeared made Victoria stagger backward, as if physically struck. Security footage, crystal clear and time-stamped, showing Victoria's assistant entering Maggie's locker room earlier that evening. The footage showed her opening Maggie's locker with a master key, placing something inside, and closing it again with obvious satisfaction. More footage showed the same assistant removing a jewelry box from a service cart outside Catherine Harrington's suite, a cart that Maggie had never touched. And finally, audio captured from a storage room conversation, Victoria's own voice clearly audible as she outlined the entire conspiracy to her loyal subordinates. Frame the old woman for theft. Get her arrested, get her fired, get her gone. Then we can finally run this hotel like a proper business, instead of a retirement home for outdated employees. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Victoria's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and everyone present could see it happening in real time. Keanu turned to the police officers who still held Maggie's arms. "Officers, the woman you have in custody is innocent. The real criminal is standing right there." He gestured toward Victoria's assistant, who had begun edging toward the exit. "I have complete documentation of this conspiracy, including video evidence, audio recordings, and testimony from multiple witnesses. I will be pressing charges for theft, conspiracy, and filing false criminal accusations." The next few minutes were chaotic but satisfying. Victoria's assistant was detained before she could reach the door. Victoria herself stood frozen in place, apparently unable to process the complete reversal of her fortunes. The officers released Maggie from her handcuffs and began the process of taking new statements and reviewing the evidence that Keanu provided. Through it all, Keanu kept his attention on Maggie. The elderly housekeeper stood in the middle of the lobby, rubbing her wrists where the handcuffs had chafed her skin. She looked bewildered, overwhelmed, as if she could not quite believe that the nightmare was ending instead of beginning. Keanu approached her slowly, aware that she had just endured a tremendous shock. "Mrs. O'Brien," he said gently. "Maggie, I am so sorry this happened to you. I should have been paying closer attention to what was happening in my hotels. I should have protected you better." Maggie looked up at him with eyes that were just beginning to fill with tears. "You are the owner?" "Yes, Mom. For the past 7 years. And you knew. You knew what they were planning to do to me. I suspected. I came here to investigate. When I understood the full scope of what Victoria was planning, I made sure we would have evidence to prove your innocence." He paused. "I also made sure that Mrs. Harrington knew what was happening. The necklace that was planted in your locker was not her real jewelry. It was a copy we arranged specifically for this purpose. Maggie's eyes widened. Catherine knew. She insisted on helping. She said that anyone who would harm you would have to go through her first. Keanu smiled gently. You have very loyal friends, Mrs. O'Brien. The tears finally spilled over, running down Maggie's weathered cheeks in streams of released tension and overwhelming relief. She did not sob or wail or make any sound at all. She simply stood there crying quietly while 25 years of service and dedication were finally, properly acknowledged. Catherine Harrington emerged from the elevator at that moment, still wearing her birthday gown, her real diamond necklace sparkling at her throat. She crossed the lobby directly to Maggie and wrapped the smaller woman in a fierce embrace. My dear friend, Catherine said, her own voice thick with emotion. Did you really think I would let them hurt you? After everything you have done for me over the years? I did not know what to think. Maggie whispered. When they put those handcuffs on me, I thought my whole life was over. Your life is just beginning a new chapter. Catherine replied firmly. And I intend to make sure it is a beautiful one. The lobby gradually cleared as the police completed their work and guests retreated to their rooms to discuss the extraordinary events they had witnessed. Victoria was escorted away by officers, her professional composure finally cracking into something raw and desperate. Her assistant followed soon after, loudly protesting her innocence despite the video evidence that clearly contradicted her claims. But Keanu was not finished. He guided Maggie to a quiet seating area near the fireplace, away from the remaining onlookers and the staff members who were still processing what had occurred. Catherine joined them, along with George the bartender, who had clearly been watching the entire confrontation with deep satisfaction. Maggie, Keanu began, I want you to know that what happened tonight will never happen again. Not here, not at any of my properties. The people who did this to you will face the full consequences of their actions. Maggie nodded slowly, still appearing somewhat dazed. I just do not understand why. Why did she hate me so much? I never did anything to her. I never even spoke to her unless she spoke to me first. Keanu was silent for a moment. The truth was, he did not fully understand Victoria's motivations either. The conspiracy had been so elaborate, so determined, that simple professional disagreement seemed insufficient to explain it. Some people, he said carefully, carry wounds that make them see enemies everywhere. They hurt others because they themselves have been hurt, and they cannot find any other way to process that pain. That does not excuse what she did. No, it does not. Nothing excuses trying to destroy an innocent person's life. Keanu leaned forward. But understanding why people do terrible things sometimes helps us find our way to something better than revenge. Maggie looked at him with sudden intensity. You are not going to let her go, are you? After what she tried to do, I am going to make sure she faces legal consequences for her actions. She committed crimes, and crimes have penalties. Keanu paused. But I am also going to try to understand what created the person who could do this. Because if we do not understand, we cannot prevent it from happening again. The conversation shifted to more practical matters. Keanu explained that he would be implementing immediate changes to how the hotel was managed, including new protections for long-serving employees and better oversight of management decisions. He asked Maggie about her life, her needs, her hopes for the future, and then he made her an offer that left her speechless. I want you to retire, Maggie. Not because you are too old to work, but because you have earned the right to rest. I want to provide you with a full pension based on 25 years of service, plus a settlement that will ensure you never have to worry about money again. Maggie shook her head immediately. I cannot accept charity, Mr. Reeves. I have worked my whole life. I do not know how to do anything else. It is not charity. It is what you should have been earning all along. Keanu smiled. But if you truly want to keep working, I have another proposal. I want to create a new position at the Grandview. a guest relations ambassador, someone who understands what hospitality really means, someone who can train new employees and mentor young staff and ensure that the values that built this hotel are never forgotten. He leaned forward. I want that person to be you. Maggie's eyes filled with fresh tears. I do not know what to say. Say yes. Say you will help me make this place what it was always supposed to be. Before Maggie could respond, Catherine Harrington interjected. And say you will finally accept my invitation to visit Seattle. Your daughter has been waiting for you, Maggie. She wants you in her life. Her children want their grandmother. But my apartment here will be waiting for you whenever you want to return, Keanu assured her. Or we can help you find something closer to the hotel. Whatever you need, Maggie. Whatever makes your life better. The elderly housekeeper sat in silence for a long moment, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortunes. An hour ago, she had been in handcuffs, facing the destruction of everything she had built. Now she was being offered more kindness and support than she had ever imagined possible. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing all of this for me? Keanu's expression softened. Because you reminded me of something I should never have forgotten. The measure of a business is not its profit margins or its efficiency ratings. It is how it treats the people who show up every day and give their best. You have given this hotel 25 years of your best, Maggie. The least I can do is give you something in return. The days that followed brought profound changes to the Grandview Hotel. Victoria Ashford was charged with multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit theft, filing false criminal accusations, and fraud. Her assistant faced similar charges. Both were released on bail pending trial, but their careers in hospitality were effectively over. No hotel would hire them after the story became public, and the story most certainly became public. But something unexpected happened during the legal proceedings that followed. Victoria's attorney requested a meeting with Keanu, claiming that his client wanted to explain her actions. Against the advice of his own legal team, Keanu agreed to the meeting. It took place in a small conference room at the law office, with attorneys present on both sides. Victoria looked nothing like the polished professional who had terrorized the Grandview's staff. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple attire. Her perfect hair was now simply pulled back. Her makeup, if she wore any at all, was minimal. She looked, for the first time, like a human being rather than a corporate machine. I do not expect you to forgive me, Victoria began, her voice barely above a whisper. I do not deserve forgiveness. What I did to Maggie was unforgivable. Keanu remained silent, waiting. But I want you to understand why. Not as an excuse, there is no excuse, but as an explanation. Victoria's hands were trembling slightly, so that maybe you can prevent someone else from becoming what I became. She took a deep breath and began to speak. My grandmother raised me. My mother was not in the picture, and my father was worse than absent. My grandmother was a housekeeper at a resort in Florida. She worked there for 32 years. 32 years of cleaning other people's messes, washing other people's sheets, making other people's beds. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. She was the kindest person I ever knew. She never complained. She never asked for anything. She just gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left. What happened to her? When she was 68, the resort was bought by a new company. They decided she was too slow, too old, not worth keeping around. They found an excuse to fire her. Some minor infraction they blew out of proportion. Victoria's eyes were wet now. She lost her pension, her health insurance, everything she had worked for. And 6 months later, she died. Alone, in a rented room that she could barely afford. The room was silent except for Victoria's ragged breathing. I was 16 when she died, and I swore to myself that I would never be like her. I would never be soft. I would never be vulnerable. I would never let anyone have power over me. She looked directly at Keanu. I built my entire career on that promise. And somewhere along the way, I became the exact thing that destroyed my grandmother. I became the cold, efficient executive who saw older workers as problems to be eliminated rather than people to be valued. So you targeted Maggie because she reminded you of your grandmother. Victoria nodded miserably. Every time I looked at her, I saw my grandmother, and I hated her for it. I hated that she was still working at 70 when my grandmother died at 68. I hated that she was loved when my grandmother was discarded. I hated that she seemed at peace with her life when my grandmother died in despair. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I know it does not make sense. I know it is twisted and wrong. I was punishing Maggie for crimes she did not commit. I was taking out my anger at the world on an innocent woman who had done nothing but serve others her entire life. Keanu sat with this confession for a long moment. The room felt heavy with pain, with regret, with the weight of wounds that had never properly healed. "What happened to your grandmother was wrong," he finally said. "It was a failure of the people who employed her and the system that was supposed to protect her. I am sorry you had to experience that loss." Victoria looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I do not deserve your sympathy. Maybe not, but I am giving it anyway." Keanu leaned forward. "Because I think you need to understand something. What you did to Maggie was not strength. It was weakness. Real strength is not about protecting yourself by hurting others. Real strength is about protecting others even when it costs you something. I know that now. Too late, but I know it. It is not too late." Keanu paused, considering his next words carefully. "The charges against you will proceed. You committed crimes, and you need to face the consequences. But what happens after that is up to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean that your life is not over, Victoria. You made terrible choices, but you are not irredeemable. If you genuinely want to become a different person, if you genuinely want to honor your grandmother's memory instead of betraying it, then there will be opportunities for you on the other side of this." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you help me? After what I did?" "Because holding on to anger only hurts the person holding it. Because forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior. It is about refusing to let that behavior define your own future." Keanu stood up. "And because my grandmother was also a housekeeper. She worked her entire life in jobs that most people considered beneath them. She died before I became successful enough to give her everything she deserved. But I honor her memory every day by trying to treat people the way she treated everyone she met. With dignity, with respect, with kindness." He extended his hand toward Victoria. "Your grandmother deserved better. So does Maggie. So does everyone who works in jobs that society undervalues. If you want to honor your grandmother's memory, start there. Start by becoming the kind of person who lifts up the people society tries to push down." Victoria took his hand with trembling fingers. "I do not know if I can change. Neither do I. But I know you cannot change if you do not try." She was sentenced to 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. The service requirement was specifically designed to have her working in support roles at homeless shelters and senior centers, doing the kind of invisible labor that she had once scorned. Keanu followed her progress through occasional reports from the organizations where she volunteered. The early months were difficult. She resisted. She complained. She made excuses. But gradually, something began to shift. The people she served started to affect her in ways she had not anticipated. Their gratitude, their resilience, their quiet dignity in the face of hardship began to crack the armor she had spent decades constructing. On the first anniversary of Maggie's near arrest, Victoria reached out to request a meeting. Not through attorneys this time, but through a simple handwritten letter. She wanted to apologize to Maggie in person. Keanu arranged the meeting at the Grandview, in a private room overlooking the ocean. Maggie agreed to attend, though she made clear that she was doing so for her own healing rather than for Victoria's benefit. The two women sat across from each other for the first time since that terrible night. Victoria spoke first, her voice steady but clearly emotional. "I spent a year trying to figure out what to say to you. How to apologize for something that has no apology, and I still do not have the right words." She paused. "So I will just say what is true. I tried to destroy your life. I tried to take away your dignity, your reputation, everything you had built over 25 years. And I did it because I was too broken and too angry to see you as a person. I saw you as a symbol of something I hated, and I punished you for my own pain." Maggie listened in silence, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "I am sorry," Victoria continued. "Those words are not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. But I am sorry, and I am trying to become someone who would never do what I did to you. Someone my grandmother would not be ashamed of." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Maggie spoke. "I spent a lot of time being angry at you, angry at what you tried to do. Angry at what you said about me being too old and too slow. Angry at how you made me feel that night in the lobby." She shook her head slowly. "But anger is heavy. It weighs you down. And I am too old to carry that kind of weight anymore. You do not have to forgive me. I do not expect. I am not finished." Maggie's voice was firm but not unkind. "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, not because what you did was okay. I forgive you because I choose not to let what you did define the rest of my life. I choose to let it go." Victoria's face crumbled. "How? How can you just let it go?" "Because my husband taught me something before he died. He carried anger for 40 years, anger at the war, at the government, at everyone he blamed for what happened to him in Vietnam. And it ate him alive. It destroyed his health and his happiness and almost destroyed our marriage." Maggie's eyes were distant, remembering. Near the end, he finally let it go. He forgave the people he had blamed for so long. And he told me that those final months, after he forgave, were the only time in 40 years that he felt truly free. She reached across the table and took Victoria's hands in her own. "I am choosing freedom. I am choosing to remember what you did but not be defined by it. I am choosing to believe that you can become a better person." She squeezed gently. "Can you do the same? Can you forgive yourself and start becoming who you were meant to be?" Victoria could not speak. She could only nod through her tears. They sat together for a long time after that, two women from different generations and different circumstances, finding their way towards something that looked remarkably like healing. Maggie retired from housekeeping 6 months after her vindication. But she did not stop working entirely. She took the position Keanu had offered, becoming the Grandview's first guest relations ambassador. Her duties were light but meaningful. Training new employees in the art of genuine hospitality. Mentoring young staff members who needed guidance. Greeting longtime guests who had become friends over the decades. She also finally accepted her daughter's invitation to visit Seattle. What was supposed to be a 2-week trip extended to a month, then 2 months. As she reconnected with grandchildren she had been too busy to properly know before. She found a rhythm that included both the Grandview and her family, splitting her time between California and Washington, belonging fully to both places. Catherine Harrington remained a close friend, visiting the hotel regularly and always requesting time with Maggie during her stays. Their friendship, forged over 15 years of small kindnesses and quiet conversations, only deepened after the shared trauma of that terrible night. George, the bartender, continued serving drinks and collecting stories, now with a new favorite tale to tell about the night when the real owner of the Grandview Hotel revealed himself and saved a good woman from destruction. And Victoria Ashford completed her community service and her counseling, emerging as someone genuinely different from the person she had been. She never worked in hospitality again. Instead, She took a position with a nonprofit organization that advocated for elderly workers' rights, using her business skills to fight for the people she had once dismissed as obsolete. Every year, on the anniversary of Maggie's vindication, Victoria sent flowers to the Grandview. The card always said the same thing: "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." As for Keanu, he remained a silent owner, visiting his hotels occasionally, but never announcing his presence. He preferred it that way. The hotels ran well under new management that he had carefully selected. Management that understood that hospitality was about people rather than profit margins. But he never forgot the lessons that the Grandview had taught him. He never forgot that the most valuable employees were often the ones who worked the longest hours for the least recognition. He never forgot that cruelty usually originated from pain, and that understanding that pain was the first step toward healing it. And he never forgot Maggie. Years later, when people asked him about his business philosophy, he would sometimes tell a version of this story. Not the dramatic parts about hidden cameras and midnight arrests and corporate conspiracies. The quieter parts. The parts about an elderly housekeeper who spent her own money to help guests she would never see again. The parts about a woman who endured public humiliation without saying a single word in her own defense, because she believed that her dignity did not depend on other people's opinions. The parts about forgiveness. The measure of a business, he would say, is not how it treats its most important customers. It is how it treats the people who clean the rooms and serve the food and answer the phones at 3 in the morning. If you get that right, everything else follows. And somewhere in California, in a beautiful hotel overlooking the Pacific Ocean, an elderly woman in a crisp uniform still greeted guests with genuine warmth, still remembered their names and their preferences and their stories, still found ways to make strangers feel like family, because that was what hospitality really meant. Not efficiency, not profit margins, not modernization, people, connection, kindness, and sometimes, if you were very lucky and very observant, forgiveness. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you'd like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter we're preparing for you.